Footsteps into the Tomb, The Secret of the Lost Truyen City. Genre: supernatural horror based on alleged true story. People in the northwest desert of China speak in hushed tones when they mention the Truyen ruins. They say the wind doesn't howl the right whispers. Whispers of footsteps that shouldn't be heard. Of lights flickering under the sand. Of entire expeditions that walked in but never walked out. It was never officially mapped. The military tried. They sent drones. They sent satellites. But nothing ever captured more than dunes and distortion. And so, it became legend. That's where our story begins. Batnet wasn't a believer in ghosts. He believed in facts, in surviving, in old books and even older traps. He was once in the army, but after years of chasing ancient secrets with nothing to show but scars, he worked odd jobs around the desert towns near the Gobi. That was where he met Truyen Bio. Truyen was the kind of man who looked like he couldn't run from a chicken, but who could dig a tunnel under a fortress if he had to. He was loud, loyal, and always hungry for food and for stories. They made an unlikely pair, but somehow they balanced each other. One chased logic, the other chased legends. And when Truyen stumbled upon an old, moth-eaten map in a black market shop, knew exactly who to show it to. It wasn't just any map. It was drawn on what felt like leather but shimmered oddly in light. The ink looked like dried blood, and the symbols weren't entirely Chinese. It was marked only by one name, Truyen, scratched in faded characters, next to an X in the middle of nothing. "It's fake," Batnet said flatly. "Or it's worth dying for," Truyen replied, almost grinning. Against all reason, they set out into the sands, 3 days in, tents full of scorpions, heat that made your skin peel, compass needles spinning in circles. But it was on the 4th night that they met Hershely Yang. She wasn't from around there, that much was clear. American Chinese, pale skin covered in sand, boots worn down from miles of walking alone. She said she was an archaeologist. The way she looked at their maps said otherwise. "You boys really don't know what you're holding, do you?" she asked. "You do." Narrowed his eyes. "I've been searching for that place for 6 years, she whispered. "That's not just a tomb. That's a prison. Something was buried there to keep the world safe." Didn't believe her. Not fully. But something in the desert that night felt off. The wind was too quiet, the stars too still. They all agreed to travel together just for safety. By the 5th day, things started to unravel. The sands shifted oddly beneath their feet, not like dunes, like breathing. Truyen said he heard flute music in the wind, but no one else did. Shirley kept checking her old compass, only to throw it away in frustration. And then, as dusk fell, the sand caved, a hollow sound, like stone beneath. They had found it. Truyen, an ancient city, long swallowed by the desert. Its walls were carved into the stone below the sands, preserved like something had kept time away from it. Strange symbols lined the arches, not writing warnings, but they didn't heed them. They descended into the darkness, torches flickering as air shifted around them like someone was breathing just behind their ears. The silence inside wasn't peaceful. It pressed against your chest, made your heartbeat echo too loudly. They found the first chamber. A statue stood in the center, mouth open, eyes wide in terror. No hands, as if they'd been taken. Around it were hundreds of clay dolls, all facing the wall, like they didn't want to see what happened here. "Why are they all turned away?" Truyen asked, voice trembling. "Because something behind us is watching," Shirley whispered. They turned. Nothing. Yet the air felt colder. The shadows seemed thicker. They pushed forward. At each step, the walls seemed to hum, not loud-libbed like a low chant, Just below the level of hearing, the second chamber held a pool of water, black and unmoving. When Truyen shone a flashlight into it, his own reflection didn't mimic him. It blinked when he didn't, smiled when he didn't. They covered the pool and kept moving. Then came the murals, painted in what looked like dried blood. They showed people with their mouths sewn shut, eyes hollow, pointing at a dark figure. A tall shape with no face, only a mouth on its chest. In the final painting, the figure raised a hand and the city fell into fire. This isn't just history, Shirley said. It's prophecy. At the end of the corridor, they reached a sealed stone door. No handles, no lock, only an inscription. He who lights the candle walks with the dead. I've heard of this, Shirley said. The old grave diggers called it Mothwehan, ghosts blow out the light. In old tombs, they said if your candle flickered, it meant a spirit was breathing beside you. If it went out, you were next. H.E.H. frowned. So how do we open it? Shirley pulled out an ancient matchstick, lit a candle, and placed it near the base of the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a gust of wind from inside blew out the flame. The stone door groaned open. Inside, there was no treasure, no gold, only bones. Piles of them, human, animal, some unidentifiable. And at the center, a coffin wrapped in chains, 9 heavy iron locks, and one strange detail, a hole carved near the top, shaped like a mouth. Someone or something was meant to talk from inside, Shirley muttered. As they stepped closer, Truyen's flashlight flickered, then went out. The others followed. Total darkness. A soft whisper, light the candle again. But none of them said it. H.H. lit the match again. The flame glowed. But their shadows were wrong. There were 4 of them now. Something moved between the beams of light, just outside vision, crawling on the ceiling, or maybe beneath their feet, whispering, breathing. They didn't wait. They ran. Back through the corridors, past the statues, past the pool. But the exit was gone. Sand had collapsed over the entrance, and as they stood in the cold darkness, Shirley turned to the others. Some things followed us out. Outside, the desert looked the same. Stars above, wind in the air. But Truyen wouldn't speak for hours, just stared at his reflection in his metal water bottle. At one point, he smiled, but it wasn't his smile. That night, while they set camp, Shirley found a single clay doll in her backpack. She hadn't taken one. It was facing the other way, and somewhere deep beneath the sand, in the silent ruins of Truyen, the chained coffin began to hum, as if something inside had finally remembered its name. The desert that screams when a ghost needs no form. They say the desert is alive, not just in the poetic sense, not just the way the dunes shift and whisper in the wind, but alive with memory, with something that listens, something that waits. And sometimes when the stars disappear and the wind changes its voice, the desert begins to speak. The sandstorm came with no warning. Just minutes before, the sky had been clear. The stars hung sharp and silent above, and Shirley had been boiling water while Truyen poked at the fire with the end of his shovel. H.H. Batnet had just finished checking his gear, preparing for the descent into Truyen again the next morning. Then, all at once, the fire died. No wind, no cold, just gone. And then came the sound. It wasn't the sound of a normal storm, not the whoosh of wind or the distant howl of shifting dunes. It was like breathing, but not from any direction they could identify. It surrounded them, circular, everywhere, inside them. Truyen stood frozen, holding the now-dead torch. Did you hear that? I don't hear wind, Shirley muttered. I hear. She didn't finish. The sands around them began to twist. like something was burrowing beneath the surface. Shapes moved in the corners of their vision, ever clear, never still. But too deliberate to be the storm. They packed in seconds. No time for folding, no time for reason. As they rushed to grab their bags and compass, H shouted, "Follow the ridge, north." But the compass spun uselessly. So did Shirley's. They were already lost. The desert screamed. It wasn't metaphor anymore. Something in the storm howled with the pitch of 1,000 mouths screaming in unison. But there was no shape, no body, just a presence. It raced around them, pressing close, flickering like shadows behind their eyes. Not visible, but felt. Every pore of their skin felt watched. They ran hands over mouths, cloth over ice, but the storm seemed to follow them. Or worse, guide them. Shirley tripped first. Her boot caught on something half buried beneath the sand. H helped her up but froze when he realized what it was. A hand, mummified, blackened by time, reaching up from the sand like it had never given up, trying to claw back into the world. Not bones, flesh, dried and frozen in a last act of despair. And there were more. Half-buried faces, pieces of cloth, a rusted canteen, a shattered lens from a pair of glasses. An old expedition, Shirley said, almost breathless. This was someone's camp. Then why is it right under our feet? Truyen asked. We were just here. There was nothing. Then the storm stopped. Not gradually, instantly. The air stilled like someone had held their breath. The sand fell from the sky like broken glass, heavy and silent. They looked round. Their own tracks were gone, and the ridge they had followed was no longer there. But something else was. A figure, standing in the distance, alone, faceless, no clothes, no details, just a silhouette, black against the dim moonlight, like it had been burnt into the world. It didn't move, didn't speak. Then it did something far worse. It tilted its head, slow and unnatural, like bones that didn't belong to anything human. Then it stepped toward them. H raised his shovel defensively. Truyen fumbled with a flare. Shirley reached for her camera and thought better of it. But as the figure stepped forward, it dissolved. Not into mist, not into sand. It just ceased to exist. No trace, no footprint. Like the desert had swallowed it wholly and hadn't even needed to chew. They didn't talk after that. They walked. For hours. Shirley kept whispering numbers under her breath. Truyen muttered a prayer his grandmother had taught him. H kept checking his watch. But the second hand had frozen. And then the ground gave way. They fell. Not deep. Just enough to roll down a short incline. The sand was soft, but underneath it stone. They had found something again. Another chamber. But not part of the city. This was new. Or older. Far older. Carvings lined the curved stone walls, twisting serpents with human faces. Suns that bled. And in the center of the floor, a single candle, untouched by sand. It was already lit. Truyen stepped back. Nope. We didn't do that. That was already burning. No wind here, Shirley noted, her voice hollow. We're underground. Nothing should burn this long. Then it's not burning from oil or wax, H said grimly. It's burning from memory. The candle flickered, and in that flicker something appeared on the wall behind them. A shadow. Not theirs. It stretched unnaturally tall, arms long and stiff, head tilted sideways. It didn't move. Then Shirley's bag burst open. The clay doll fell out again. Only now its face was turned toward them. H smashed it instantly. But from the hole where the head once was, sand poured out. More than could fit inside such a small figure. And in that sand was an eye. Not carved, not fake. A real eye. Dried, gray, lifeless eye, it somehow still watching. They fled the chamber. No time to map it, no time to mark it. They climbed back to the surface, though they had no idea how far they'd fallen. But when they emerged, they saw it. The city, Truyen, half uncovered. The storm had stripped away a layer of sand to reveal spires, broken walls, stairways that led into blackness. The city should not have been there. Not yet, but it was waiting. The wind howled again, distant this time. No storm, just a sound, like someone blowing out a candle from very far away. They made camp at the edge of a ruined gate. None of them slept. Around midnight, Truyen turned to HH. "You remember that figure we saw in the storm? The one that vanished," HH replied. Truyen nodded. "I think it didn't vanish. I think it went inside one of us." Shirley looked up slowly. The flame in their lantern flickered. In the morning, Shirley discovered something chilling scratched into the side of her camera lens. "You brought me back." She hadn't written it. None of them had. And when they turned on the radio transmitter to check their signal, a voice came through. Not theirs. Not a language they knew. But it was laughing. Low, deep, familiar. Like something that had traveled with them all along now finally found its voice. "Cracked stone tomb, the door of the cursed. Some places aren't meant to be found, and some doors are meant to stay closed." Truyen was no longer hidden. After the storm had peeled back layers of sand, the ancient city now lay exposed under the heavy silence of morning light. Cracked spires jutted up like broken bones, and narrow alleys wound through a maze of forgotten stone. But it wasn't the city itself that pulled them in, it was the tomb. They found it in the northern corner, half buried, half broken, as if the desert had tried to swallow it, but gave up halfway. A wide stone door leaned inward, not open, not closed, cracked, and through that narrow split came the smell. It wasn't decay. It wasn't rot. It was ancient, like time itself had been preserved and was now leaking out, one breath at a time. H. Batnet stood in front of the doorway, unmoving. He had seen tombs before, dug through sand, crawled through booby traps, even found gold under centuries of filth. But never had a tomb made him feel like this. The very air resisted entry. His skin prickled. His teeth felt cold. His breath fogged. Even in the sun. "Are we going in?" Truyen asked, more whisper than question. "No," Shirley answered, even as she stepped forward. "But we have to." The first step was the hardest. The moment her boot crossed the cracked threshold, a soft grinding sound came from the waltz-like stone, awakening, like something very old noticing. She paused, listened. Nothing followed, but her heart beat so loudly, she wondered if something else was now beating with it. HH and Truyen entered behind her. The interior was pitch black, but their flashlights flickered oddly, not like a power issue, more like the light hesitated, reluctant to shine too far ahead. The tomb walls were covered in carvings, figures without faces, kneeling toward a towering shape with 3 eyes, one in the head, one in the chest, and the third at the bottom of its spine. Each figure held a candle. Each one had its flame blown out. They passed the footprint room next. Not drawings, actual footprints frozen into the stone, left by bare feet long ago, dozens of them. But they led only inward, never out. Each print seemed deep, like the weight of the person pressing down had increased tenfold in their final steps. Truyen bent to touch one. It was still warm. At the end of the hallway, they reached a large chamber, sealed by 2 enormous slabs of stone. On each slab, handprints were carved, not flat, indented, as if the stone had been melted by the press of real hands long ago. Shirley examined the symbols above the doorway. "This is a gate," she said. "It requires blood to open." "You sure?" HH asked. She nodded. It's not metaphorical, the writing says. Only those who offer the warmth of life may pass into the house of silence. Truyen didn't wait. He pricked his finger with a pocket knife, pressed it against the stone handprint. For a second, nothing happened. Then the stone trembled. A deep grinding echoed through the chamber. Dust fell. The slabs shifted aside with a noise like bones dragging across floorboards. The passage beyond opened like a wound. Inside, it was colder, much colder. The corridor narrowed. The walls seemed to curve and bend not architecturally, but wrongly. Angles that shouldn't exist, depths that felt too deep, shadows that bent toward them instead of away. Something moved at the edge of their lights. Never seen, only felt. They came to a second room. Circular, silent. The ceiling had collapsed slightly, letting a beam of pale light filter through. In the center was a stone table, and upon it lay something wrapped in silk and chains. A corpse, but it was fresh. No decay, no smell. Just a man-mouth stitched shut, eyes open wide, as if he'd died trying to scream, but the silence had won. Shirley pulled out her camera, snapped one photo. When she checked the display, the man's head was turned, staring directly into the lens. She gasped, looked up. The corpse hadn't moved, but when she checked again, the stitches were gone. "I think this place remembers us," Truyen whispered. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's not just showing us things, it's reacting, it's changing." Behind the stone table, they found a set of stairs leading downward. Each step was carved with a name. Dozens of them. Shirley paused on the third step. "This one's my grandfather's name." "What?" She traced the carved letters. Yang Jiwei. He disappeared in the 1960s. He was on a dig team that vanished in Xinjiang. "Do you think this is where they went?" H asked. But Shirley didn't answer. They continued down. The air thickened, not with dust, but with sound. A humming low, rhythmic, like breathing or chanting. The words couldn't be heard clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. Grief, like the stones were mourning, like something within had been crying for centuries and had just noticed they'd arrived. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a vast chamber. Columns lined the space heat in total, each wrapped in faded red cloth and painted with ink sigils. In the center was a well, but not for water. This one was filled with mirrors, shards of reflective glass, metal, obsidian, dozens of pieces shimmering under their light, though there was no source of reflection. "Don't look into it," Shirley warned. Truyen was already leaning over. He saw his face, then saw his face smile back, even though he wasn't smiling. Then it opened its mouth. Truyen staggered back, gasping. "I saw something else," he said. "I saw me, but it wasn't me. It had no eyes, just skin where they should be." And it whispered. "What?" It said, "You're already mine." H wanted to leave. Now. But the path back was gone. The hallway they had descended was no longer behind them, only a blank wall. And on that wall was a drawing of the three of them, standing, holding torches, their faces scratched out. "Something is sealing us in," Shirley said quietly. "And it's showing us what it wants," H added. They turned back to the chamber. The mirror well began to shake. Not physical limit in its reflection. It showed movement that didn't exist. Lights, faces, arms reaching up, and then the whispering returned, all around them. But this time, it said one word: "Stay." The torches flickered. The temperature dropped. The room darkened. And from behind the columns, they saw it. The shadow. Not a ghost, not a person. Just formlessness. It slithered between spaces, dripped from ceiling to floor. No eyes, no face, but aware, watching. Then it spoke, not aloud, but directly into their minds. You have brought light where none was wanted. Now you will carry the darkness." Then it moved, faster than thought, straight toward Shirley. She fell, screaming, but before it touched her, Truyen stepped in. The shadow paused, then slid into him. Truyen's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came. And then he stood, still Truyen, but somehow not. "I'm fine," he said, smiling weakly. But the others didn't believe him, because Truyen never spoke in perfect English before. The nine-headed serpent, the guardian not of treasure. The desert hides many secrets, but some are older than time. Some are best left undisturbed. Truyen was no ordinary lost city. Even now, as the sun scorched its cracked walls, something stirred beneath its ancient stones. Something bound by chains far heavier than iron. Inside the deepest chambers, past the shattered mirror well, and the cursed tomb, the air grew thick, not just with dust, but with an ominous energy like the heartbeat of the city itself. Shirley, and the changed Truyen descended the final stairs. Their flashlights flickered uncertainly as shadows danced on the wall stew, quick to be just tricks of the light. At the bottom lay a vast cavern, lit by eerie green phosphorescence from mosses clinging to damp stones. In the center sprawled a massive statue, cracked and worn by centuries, yet terrifying in its detail. It was a serpent, nine-headed, coiled around a throne of bones, each head snarled with ferocity, fangs bared, eyes glazed over but somehow still menacing. Legend says it was a guardian, Shirley whispered, voice barely above breath. Stepped closer, careful not to disturb the ground. "Guardian of what?" he asked. "Not treasure," Shirley replied. "But souls," she added, swallowing hard. The statue wasn't just decoration, it was a seal, bound by ancient spells and curses to hold something back, something dangerous. They noticed chains, not just metal, but carvings of chains wrapping the serpent itself, binding it to the floor. Round the statue's base were inscriptions sworn, but legible. "Here lies the protector, keeper of the restless. Break the seal, and the restless awaken." Felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Restless?" he asked. "Souls trapped," Shirley said. "Not just of humans, but something else." Truyen, still pale and distant, touched the serpent's tail. His eyes glazed over. He muttered words that didn't sound like any language they knew. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the cavern. Dust fell from the ceiling. The serpent's eyes glowed faintly red. Chains rattled. "Get back," shouted. But it was too late. The nine heads stirred. The oldest guardian in centuries was waking. With a thunderous roar, the statue cracked. Stone splintered, and from the cracks emerged something alive. The nine-headed serpent was no longer stone. It was flesh, a creature of nightmares. Its eyes burned with fury. Its fangs dripped venom that hissed on the stone floor. The air grew thick with poison and fear. Shirley, and Truyen backed away slowly. The cavern echoed with the serpent's hiss and growls. They remembered the stories, old tales of the guardian who devoured any who dared seek the city's riches. But these weren't just stories. The serpent lunged, not at them, at the chains. With a swipe of a claw, the chains shattered. A deep, guttural growl filled the chamber. Something long imprisoned was breaking free. From the darkness beyond, shadows twisted and writhed, invisible but palpable. They swirled around the serpent, feeding its power. Shouted, "We have to seal it back." Shirley frantically searched the inscriptions. She found a faded symbol, a ritual, but the air thickened. The shadows grew hungry. Truyen stepped forward, his eyes now fully glazed. He spoke in a low voice. "I am the key. The serpent turned its many heads towards him, and then it spoke, not in words, in visions. Truyen's mind was flooded with images, ancient battles, souls trapped in eternal torment, a pact made between man and beast. The serpent was not a guardian of gold or jewels. It was a guardian of balance, keeper of the boundary between the living and the dead. Breaking the seal meant unleashing chaos. Shirley realized the truth. They hadn't come for treasure. They had come to awaken an ancient force. Truyen raised his hand. Chains of light emerged from the walls. They wrapped around the serpent and himself. The cavern trembled. The serpent's roar echoed louder. But the chains held. A final burst of energy. The serpent was sealed once again. Truyen collapsed. His eyes cleared. He looked at Shirley and HH. "We are guardians now," he whispered. They left the cavern. The city's secrets remained hidden. For now, the desert was silent once more. But deep beneath, the serpent waited. The forbidden book prophecy of the Eyeless One. Deep within the labyrinthine tombs of Truyen, where shadows gather like thick smoke and silence weighs heavier than stone, Shirley Dieng made a discovery that changed everything. It wasn't gold. It wasn't jewels. It was a book. The book lay in a small chamber carved into the wall, hidden beneath piles of broken pottery and faded scrolls, bound in cracked leather and held shut by a rusted clasp shaped like a claw. The tome seemed to pulse with a faint, unnatural glow. Shirley's fingers trembled as she reached out. "Don't," HH warned, voice low and wary. But Shirley's curiosity had always been stronger than fear. She carefully broke the clasp. The pages within were brittle, yellowed with age, and covered in strange characters neither Chinese nor any language she had ever seen. The ink seemed alive, shimmering slightly as if reacting to her gaze. "Where did this come from?" Truyen asked, his voice still distant, his eyes reflecting something unspoken. Shirley shook her head. "I don't know, but this isn't just a book, it's a warning." She began to translate, word by word, line by line. But the more she read, the heavier the air grew. The words were a prophecy, a curse. It spoke of an ancient Eyeless One, a spirit that was once human, but lost its sight and gained a power beyond comprehension. It was said to roam between worlds, neither alive nor dead, neither friend nor foe. Its prophecy was terrifying, that it would return when the boundaries between the living and the dead weakened, and that its Gazethau Isla schooled see the deepest fears and secrets of the soul. As Shirley read aloud, the shadows in the chamber seemed to lean in closer. The temperature dropped. A whisper, barely audible, echoed, "The eyeless sees all." HH looked around nervously. "Do you think it's here?" Before Shirley could answer, the book's pages flipped rapidly on their own, stopping at an illustration. A figure, faceless, draped in dark robes, reaching out with hands that had no fingers. Below the figure was a symbol, a circle with a cross through the center, encircled by runes. "This symbol," Shirley whispered, "is the mark of the Eyeless One." Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her forehead. She staggered back. "It's the curse," HH said grimly. "The book doesn't want to be read." Truyen stepped forward, voice steady despite the tension. "We need to find out more. If this prophecy is true, we have to be prepared." As Shirley recovered, she continued reading. The prophecy spoke of 3 keys needed to seal the Eyeless One away again. The breath of the desert, a sacred wind trapped within the lost city. The tears of the forgotten waters from a hidden underground spring. The blood of the guardian, the life essence of the ancient serpent bound beneath the city. "We've seen the serpent," HH said, "and the desert breathes strange winds, but the tears? Where are those?" Shirley's eyes widened. There was a spring mentioned in the scrolls I saw near the city, underground, but it's hidden and protected by traps. Suddenly, the chamber doors slammed shut. The torches flickered out. The darkness pressed in like a living thing. A voice spoke deep, hollow, and everywhere. You have awakened the prophecy. The eyeless one sees you. Panic surged. Shirley frantically fumbled for a torch. Light returned, dim but steady. But the room was different. The shadows had shifted. Etched into the walls were fresh symbols. Like the tomb itself was alive, reacting to their presence. They had no choice. They had to follow the prophecy. The next days became a desperate quest, searching for the hidden spring, navigating ancient traps that tested their courage and will. At the spring's entrance, they found it guarded by carvings of ice-closed eyes. Touching them caused visions Maury's not their own, of a blind man wandering deserts, of souls lost and found. They collected water, trembling, but the air thickened again. Whispers filled their minds. The eyeless seas. Returning to the serpent's lair, they prepared for the final ritual. Truyen, still changed but resolute, offered his blood. As the ritual began, shadows gathered. The tomb shuddered. The eyeless one's presence grew. But the seal held. Light pierced the darkness. The breathing mummy, the dead who refused to be forgotten. Some stories aren't just whispered in the dark, they echo from beneath the ground. Among the countless tales of haunted tombs and cursed relics, this one remains especially disturbing. Not because of what was found, but because of what refused to stay buried. After the chaos at the tomb of the eyeless prophet, Shirley Dieng and her team were shaken, but still driven. The forbidden book had disappeared, presumably taken by someone or something that had no business walking this world. But before they could fully understand the curse that followed them, a new discovery was reported from a remote valley in western Tibet. A local tribe known as the Jerkun had unearthed what they believed to be a breathing tomb. Ancient whispers claimed that the dead inside weren't truly dead, just waiting for memory, for sacrifice or for revenge. The legends had always said this tomb was different. Instead of facing west, like most ancient burial sites, aligned with the setting sun, this one pointed straight down into the earth toward a realm the villagers called a Jaitan, or the clean underworld, where forgotten spirits roamed, angry and restless. The villagers had sealed the tomb again after strange sounds began echoing from within. Knocks, muffled moans, sometimes breathing. Not wind, not bats, breathing. Shirley, driven by equal parts scientific curiosity and dread, insisted on investigating it herself. Alongside her were two familiar companions. Professor Truyen had begun carrying talismans. Ever since the book, and Min, their young assistant, always too brave for his own good. The entrance was hidden beneath tangled roots and moss-covered stones, but once cleared, it revealed a descent of smooth stone steps leading far below the surface. On the walls, carvings showed rows of bodies, not lying peacefully, but sitting upright with their mouths sewn shut. Some had their eyes open, etched in exact detail. Too exact. As they descended, Min whispered, "Why do I feel like someone's watching us from behind the walls?" Shirley, gripping her flashlight tighter, replied softly, "Because maybe someone is." The tomb's central chamber was massive. At its heart were 9 stone sarcophagi ranged in a circle. Unlike Egyptian mummies wrapped in linen, these were preserved in resin, still sitting up, their spines fused in meditation poses. Their faces looked wrong, as though sculpted halfway between agony and enlightenment. And their skin, gray, cracked, but intact, too intact. Professor Truyen muttered a prayer under his breath. "We should not disturb them," he said. But curiosity won. One of the sarcophagi was already slightly ajar. Inside, the mummy had its head tilted back, as if gasping for air. Men, peering too close, noticed something horrifying. The mouth wasn't dry. It was moist, and its chest, faintly moved. No way, surely it's breathing. I swear to God it just moved. Shirley leaned in, skeptical, but then froze. The chamber suddenly grew colder. Her breath became visible, and from somewhere behind them, a voice, raspy, not quite human, whispered something none of them could understand. Professor turned pale. "That's ancient Thirtong dialect," he said. "It said you remember us, so we return." Suddenly, all 9 mummies let out a breath in unison, slant, but visible like mist. Then, they began twitching. Panic erupted. Men stumbled backward and knocked over a stone urn, breaking it. The noise echoed unnaturally, followed by more whispering, louder this time. Shirley grabbed his arm. "We're leaving now." But as they reached the stairway, Min was yanked back by something unseen. He screamed as invisible hands pulled him toward one of the sarcophagi. His legs thrashed. The stone lid of the nearest coffin began to slide open, and inside, a pair of eyes opened. Pale, dry, empty. Shirley lunged for him. Professor Truyen chanted a desperate mantra, tossing a talisman toward the opening coffin. The paper burst into flames mid-air, and whatever force had grabbed Min let go with a horrible hiss. They managed to pull him free, but not before something left a dark bruise across his chest like a handprint made of ash. Back at the camp, Min was feverish, whispering nonsense about the gray monks and the breathing silence. Shirley knew they had awakened something that just undead bodies, but the very memories that anchored them to this world. The next night, one of the guides disappeared. His bed was untouched, no signs of struggle, but his boots were found near the tomb's mouth, facing inward. They couldn't leave yet. Shirley believed that unless they found a way to close the tomb properly, the breathing ones would not stay inside. Worse, they might begin searching for others who dared remember them. Professor Truyen turned to the tribal elder, who gave a chilling explanation. "These were not ordinary dead," he said. "They were keepers of memory, cursed monks who volunteered to die but not pass on. They breathe so that we do not forget what they suffered. If forgotten, they become angry." The solution, according to ancient rituals, was terrifying in itself. They must offer a living witness who willingly chooses to remember them. Forever woe sees their pain and bears it. Shirley volunteered. She entered the tomb alone, carrying no weapons, only a single oil lantern and a string of charms around her neck. The mummies sat motionless again, as if never stirred. But as she approached, the one with the open coffin seemed to breathe again, and then slowly it moved its head to look at her. Her heart pounded. She closed her eyes, speaking gently. "I see you. I remember." She described each carved face on the walls, reciting the names given to her by the elder. Then, she did the unthinkable. She sat in the center of the circle just as the ancient monks once did and meditated with them. Hours passed. Professor Truyen and Min waited, terrified she might never return. But just as the sun broke the horizon, Shirley emerged alive, but different. Her eyes were tired, her voice quiet. She said nothing at first. Only days later did she explain that inside, the mummies had shown her their final memories, torture, betrayal, and a sacred duty they had upheld for centuries to trap a malevolent force in the tomb's foundation. Not gold, not treasure, but a soul eater. It was never about riches. The mummies were guardians, not monsters. But when people stopped telling their stories, stopped honoring them, they lost their peace. Shirley had made a pact. She would write their tale, publish it, ensure the world never forgot the Watchers of Ajaden again. And strangely, The breathing stopped after that. Men recovered. The bruises faded. No more whispers were heard. But every now and then, when Shirley passed a mirror at night, she swore she saw one of the monks standing behind her just watching, nodding silently. The tomb was sealed with sacred symbols, and the valley was renamed Thung Lung Kaeb PC, the Valley of Memory. Today, no tourists go there, no maps mark it. But the breathing is said to have moved to places where forgotten dead still wait. So if you ever feel cold air at night, or see something move in a corner where nothing should, ask yourself, did I forget someone I shouldn't have? The gate of life and death, once you cross, you're no longer yourself. The tomb was no longer silent, ever since they had disturbed the sealed sarcophagus in the previous chamber. A strange heaviness hung in the air. Even the torches flickered differently, dim and uncertain, like they were struggling to stay lit. "Look at this," Shirley whispered, her voice barely audible. She held up a dusty, black and white sketch found inside a cracked urn. It depicted an archway carved into the stone, narrow and ominous. At the top was an inscription in ancient, barely decipherable characters. Siake Senti, the gate of life and death. Batnet frowned. Why would they call it that? Shirley didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the accompanying notes in a faded journal. Because this wasn't just a tomb, it was a place of passage, she said slowly, a gate between our world and the one beneath it. Professor Truyen adjusted his glasses, visibly unnerved. "You mean the underworld?" "Yes," Shirley nodded. "And this gate, anyone who walked through it was believed to be changed. Some say they forgot who they were, others never came back." The group followed the twisting path until they reached the chamber depicted in the sketch. It was real. The archway stood before Thundel, untouched by time, yet disturbingly alive. Something about the stone made it feel warm to the touch, almost like skin. The gate pulsed slightly, as though it breathed. There was no physical door, just darkness, a void so thick it seemed to swallow even the torchlight. "Shirley," Batten had said, his voice unusually firm, "you stay here. I'll go first." "No way," Shirley replied. "We stick together." Before anyone could argue, Professor Truyen stepped forward. "I'll go. I'm the oldest. And this was my expedition, if anything happens." But his sentence ended in silence. He stepped through the archway, and the moment he did, the torches flickered violently. Then he turned back to them, but something was off. His eyes looked the same but blank, lifeless. He stared at the group like he didn't recognize them. "Professor," Shirley asked cautiously, "who are you?" He asked, "Where am I?" Panic set in. Shirley reached for his arm, trying to talk sense into him. But the professor recoiled like she was a stranger. "Something happened," she said, her voice shaking. "It's real. He's not the same." But before they could process it, one of the local porters, GC, suddenly darted forward too fast for anyone to stop him. He stepped into the gate, gone, and when he re-emerged seconds later, he'd looked empty, expressionless. He glanced around with the same eerie detachment. "I was just at home," he mumbled. "Why are you all dressed like this?" Shirley stared into the dark opening of the arch. "It wipes their memory," she whispered. "Or something worse, maybe it rewrites it." They debated their next move furiously. They had to reach the lower levels of the tomb. But the only path forward was through the gate of life and death. "No way I'm going through that thing," Batnet said firmly. "I'd rather blast a new tunnel with dynamite." But when they turned to the stone walls, they saw the truth. There was no other path. The chamber's architecture was a funnel, leading only one way through. And worse, behind them, the passage had begun to collapse. Stone crumbled. Dust poured from the ceiling. They were being forced forward. Finally, reluctantly, Batnet tied a red string around his wrist, handed the other end to Shirley, and muttered, "If I forget who I am, pull me back." He stepped into the gate. Darkness swallowed him. A moment passed, then two. Then he stepped out again. His face was still, blank. "Who are you?" he asked Shirley. But she smiled. "You're Batnet. Born in Haiphong. You hate snakes and can't swim. You used to tell me that cursed jade amulet looked like Bancheng." A flicker of recognition returned to his eyes. "I remember that," he said slowly. The others gasped. Somehow, memories could bring them back. One by one, they crossed, and one by one, they emerged hollow, distant. But Shirley stood before each person and reminded them. A joke they once told, a fear they always had, a childhood story they confessed during a long expedition. And bit by bit, their minds returned. It worked, until it was Shirley's turn. She stepped into the darkness, and didn't come out. Minutes passed, then half an hour, then an hour. The group called her name, shouted into the gate. No reply. Desperation turned to dread. "I'm going in," Batnet said finally. "No," the others protested. "You barely came back once." "She went in for us," he snapped. "I'm not leaving her." He dove into the darkness. But inside the gate was not a tunnel. It was another world. The laws of reality twisted here. The floor had no direction. Light didn't behave normally. It spiraled, flickered, turned cold. And in the middle of it, Shirley stood frozen, eyes wide open. Behind her stood a mirror. But it didn't reflect. It showed versions. Different Shirleys. One scared. One monstrous. One broken. One screaming. It was showing her what she could become if she forgot who she was. Batnet grabbed her shoulders. "Shirley, look at me." She blinked. "What is this place? This isn't real." He shouted. "You are not any of them. You're you. And you hate snakes. And you hate Bancheng." She laughed, just a little. But the mirror cracked. It shattered with a scream. They stumbled out of the gate together. The others rushed to them, but something had changed. They'd all felt it. This wasn't just a test of memory. It was a spiritual filter. Those who crossed and returned earned the right to go deeper. But what about the ones who didn't? Where did they go? As they moved forward, Shirley turned back to the gate. For a brief moment she thought she saw another her, standing in the void, smiling. But it wasn't her smile. It was wrong, twisted. She shook it off. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Walls began to glow faintly with patterns no one could decipher. And far ahead at the end of a long, bone-lined corridor was another door. But not just any door. It was circular, with symbols of the moon and sun intertwined. And carved deeply into the center was a handprint. A perfect human hand, but only for fingers. The masked one man or phantom, they had just passed through the so-called gate of life and death. The group, once closely bonded, was now fractured. Something unspeakable had changed in men. He barely spoke. His eyes were glassy, expression blank, movements eerily mechanical. The other Slin Tongue, Hoa, and the documentarian Dung kept glancing at one another, afraid to voice what they all silently feared. Min was no longer himself. The passage ahead narrowed again, the ancient stone pressing in like clenched jaws. A faint draft hinted at space beyond, maybe even an exit. But the air had shifted heavier, charged with something they couldn't name. Then came the whisper, not a voice among them, not an echo. It drifted across the corridor like smoke, low, rhythmic, speaking in a dialect none of them could place. "Did anyone else hear that?" Ho asked, breaking the silence. Tongue nodded, his voice tight. "Yeah, like someone praying." Lan shivered. It wasn't Vietnamese, not anything I know. They turned a corner and stopped dead. Standing in the center of a vast circular chamber was a figure, cloaked in deep crimson robes that touched the dusty floor. The figure wore an ornate mask. It was bone white, with two exaggerated black eyes, no mouth, and swirling patterns carved into its surface. The mask turned toward them. Every breath in the room seemed to freeze. Lan took a step back. Is that a person? The masked figure raised a hand slowly, as if beckoning. The hand was gloved, but something about the way it moved it wasn't quite natural. It glided, smooth as water, and stopped mid-air. Dung reflexively began filming. "Who are you?" Hoa called out, the words echoing strangely off the chamber walls. The figure didn't answer, but it moved, one step forward, then another, the mask tilting ever so slightly, as if curious. Suddenly, Min stepped toward it. "Min!" Lan shouted, grabbing his arm, but he shook her off effortlessly and kept walking. "Wait!" Tung called, lunging forward, but Min had already crossed the etched symbol in the center of the floor. The masked figure extended its hand to Min. Hand touched his forehead. A light flashed from beneath the mask. Min gasped, then dropped to his knees. And then, he screamed. It was a sound so primal, so ragged and raw, that it echoed through the bones of the tomb. Lan covered her ears. Hoa stumbled back. Tung rushed forward, but the masked figure was gone. Vanished, as if it had never existed. Only Min remained, collapsed on the cold stone floor, panting, eyes wide with terror. When they reached him, Min was muttering nonsense. "The gate, the whispering gate, she's watching behind the mask, behind the mask." Lan clutched his shoulders. "Min, look at me. Who did this to you?" But Min's eyes were locked on something only he could see. They carried him out of the chamber, deeper into the tomb. Strangely, none of them even questioned why they kept going. Something about that place compelled them forward, as if turning back wasn't an option. As they progressed, they noticed symbols appearing more frequently on the wall, strange sigils. Half animal, half human figures dancing, bleeding, kneeling, and always, the mask. It appeared again and again, drawn in charcoal, carved in stone, even etched into the ceiling. The same faceless mask with black eyes and no mouth. Dung reviewed the footage he'd just taken. "I swear I filmed the masked figure," he said. "But look." They gathered around his screen. The footage showed the chamber, the circle, the markings, but no masked figure. And worse, Min never approached anything. He just collapsed on his own. "But we saw him," Lan whispered. "We all saw him," Hoa insisted. "Then what did we see?" Dung asked, eyes narrowing. It was then that Tung noticed something strange. "Wait, guys," Min's face. Everyone turned to look. Min was still semi-conscious, breathing heavily, but there was something undeniably off. His skin looked stretched, pale, and faint black lines had appeared from the corners of his eyes, spiraling out in the same pattern as the mask. Lan gasped, No, it's happening to him." "What's happening?" Dung whispered. "He's becoming the mask." Suddenly, from the passage behind them, the whispering returned, only this time, it was louder. Closer. It didn't sound ancient anymore. It sounded angry. And then came the footsteps. Not one set, several. From the darkness emerged multiple figures wearing the same bone-white mask. Some tall, some hunched, some moving with grace, others jerking like puppets. Each mask was unique in its wear, some cracked, others pristine. But all carried the same eerie expression, blank, silent, eternal. The group backed away, dragging Min. Dung turned his camera around, shaking but filming. And then the lead masked figure raised a hand and spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." It was a human voice, male, calm, but full of restrained power. Lan, terrified but defiant, shouted back, "Who are you? Why are you doing this to him?" The figure tilted its head. "This is not punishment, it is remembrance." "Remembrance of what?" Tung demanded. "Of those forgotten, those buried without name, without ritual, without peace." The other masked ones encircled the group. "We were guardians, once, keepers of balance, until greed broke the seal. Now, the tomb remembers, and those who enter become part of it." Ho trembled. "Are you saying he's turning into one of you?" The lead figure turned to Min. "The mask chooses, the mask remembers pain." Min groaned, his face now almost unrecognizable. The patterns had spread. His eyes were completely black. Lan cried out, holding him tightly, "He's still human. He's my friend." The figure paused, then walked forward and removed his own mask. Beneath it was a man's face, aged, gaunt, with deep scars etched into his skin. But his eyes were surprisingly kind. "I was once like you," he said. "A seeker of stories, a digger of graves." "What happened?" Dung asked, unable to look away. "I found a tomb that should have stayed buried. I took artifacts, filmed the rituals, laughed at the curses, and then," Lan whispered, "I saw her. The Lady of Masks. She was the High Priestess buried in the central chamber. She doesn't forgive those who trespass. She marks them, then takes them, one by one." Behind him, the other masked ones began to chant a slow, humming sound that resonated in their chests. "You can still leave," he said, "but leave him behind." "No," Lan shouted, tears streaming. "We're not leaving Min." The man looked at her, solemn. "Then you'll stay, all of you." The walls began to shake. The symbols glowed faintly. Dust poured from the ceiling. And Min stood, no longer trembling, no longer confused. He looked at Lan, but it wasn't Min anymore. Not truly. He smiled and said, "You shouldn't have come here." Then everything went dark. When the villagers found the tomb entrance weeks later, after a sudden landslide unearthed part of the buried complex, there was no sign of the group. Only an old, dusty camera sat on a stone pedestal. Inside were recordings, but none showed any people. Only darkness, masks, and chanting. Locals sealed the tomb once again, warning others never to return. But late at night, if you walk near the hillside, you might hear a whisper, and if you listen too closely, you might forget who you are, and you'll never take off the mask again. The soul-reflecting mirror, seeing oneself in another world. The air in the underground chamber had turned inexplicably cold. Shirley Didiang's breath visibly curled in front of her as she took cautious steps forward. After the encounter with the masked figure in the burial crypt, everyone was on edge. The ancient structure had begun to feel less like a tomb and more like a living entity watching, whispering, waiting. They had ventured deeper, past the murals of forgotten rituals and symbols too warped by time to fully decipher. What they didn't expect was to stumble upon a small alcove, completely different from the rest of the tomb. It was circular, its walls carved smooth, lit by an unnatural glow that didn't seem to come from any torch or lantern. At the very center stood a mirror, but this wasn't any ordinary mirror. It was massive, almost 2 meters tall, its frame made of obsidian and something else that shimmered like liquid under the dim light. Etchings in a language none of them could read spiraled around the frame, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The surface itself looked like rippling water, and yet reflected clearly like glass. Fatigue had slowed their reactions. Fatigue and fear. "Is that a mirror?" Professor Truyen whispered, stepping toward it cautiously. Shirley felt her instinct scream, "Don't touch it." But it was already too late. However, the reckless one stepped in front of the mirror. What's the worst that could? He stopped. Everyone stared. His reflection moved differently. While Hao turned his head slightly, his reflection stared back at him directly, eyes wide. Mouth curved into a twisted grin. The air dropped another 5 degrees. Then the reflection mimicked him again, this time, perfectly. I felt something, Hao mumbled. It was like something just brushed through me. Professor Truyen, always skeptical, stepped up beside him and peered into the mirror. What is this? Some sort of ancient ritual artifact, a psychological test. Shirley didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the etchings, somehow. She understood what they meant, not through language, but through some primal feeling embedded in her bones. This mirror reflects not the body, but the soul, she murmured, more to herself than the others. And sometimes the soul looking back isn't yours anymore. The others turned to her. You say that like you've seen this before, Hao said, uneasy. I haven't, she said. But I know what it is. This is the GGN Soi Lin and the Soul Mirror. The locals once whispered about it in ancient folklore. A cursed object hidden deep beneath sacred ground. A mirror that reveals your truest essence and exposes imposters. Imposters? Truyen raised an eyebrow. She turned to face them both, her voice steady. It's said that in places like this, spirits can merge with the living. They steal your image, your memories, but they can't fake your soul. Hao laughed nervously. You're scaring me, Shirley. Maybe you should be scared. She stepped toward the mirror now, and as she did, a sudden gust blew through the chamber, though there were no vents, no corridors that could have caused it. She looked into the mirror. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. Her reflection was crying, not with sorrow but with terror. Her mirrored self slammed its palms against the inside of the glass, silently screaming, eyes pleading. No, Shirley whispered. No, no, no. The others rushed to her side, but when they looked into the mirror they only saw Shirley's normal reflection. What's going on? Truyen demanded. Someone isn't who they claim to be, she said, stepping back, trembling. Hao scoffed. You're being paranoid. But Shirley's eyes had locked onto something else now. Behind their reflections, in the depths of the mirror, were shadows, 3 of them. But they didn't match the movements of the group. They stood just slightly off. One tilted its head the wrong way. One had no eyes. One wasn't moving at all. This mirror shows our souls, she said again, slower this time. And if one of us isn't reflecting right. The silence was sliced by a deep, metallic ringing. The mirror began to tremble. Without warning, the surface of the mirror shimmered, then flickered like a TV losing signal. And then, for just a second, all 3 of them saw it. One of them had no reflection. Hao was gone from the mirror. He stood there, in front of it, wide-eyed, mouth open. But in the glass nothing. Just Shirley and Professor Truyen. Then the mirror cracked, a small fracture at first, then another, splitting across the surface like a spider web. The sound echoed through the chamber like shattering bone. No, 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 Hao shouted, stepping back. Shirley grabbed him. What are you? I'm me, he shouted. It's a trick, a stupid ancient trick. But his eyes flickered. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, they went completely black. Truyen noticed it too. Did anyone else see that? Shirley nodded, her voice dry. Yes. Then Hao laughed. Not his usual, cocky laugh. It was guttural, deep, wrong. The kind of laugh that came from a throat that wasn't built to laugh anymore. You almost had me, he said in a different voice. But you're too late. He turned and walked into the mirror. Shirley screamed. But it was like watching someone step into water. Ripples spread. And then he was gone. In his place, the mirror went black, then lit up again. This time, The reflection in the mirror was a twisted version of the chamber. No Shirley, no Truyen. Just a dark, rotting version of the tomb. And in the center Hao, sitting on the floor, eyes hollow, skin cracked like old porcelain. He was trapped, but the thing that had been wearing his body, it was now in their world. Shirley turned to Truyen. We have to get out, but if that thing is loose, then we have to stop it. They didn't have much time. The mirror had gone quiet now, but Shirley knew that meant little. It had served its purpose. Whatever ancient curse rested on this tomb had already reached beyond its boundaries. They didn't just open a tomb. They opened a door, and something had come through. Outside the chamber, the hallways had changed. Symbols on the walls, blood fresh crimson. The torches sputtered, though there was no wind, and the air smelled of rot. Shirley turned to Truyen, her voice shaky but determined. Whatever took Hao, it knew us. It knew our memories, our fears, which means it's going to use them, Truyen added. As they moved deeper, they heard whispers, familiar voices, laughter, footsteps that weren't theirs. Then Hao's voice. Guys, wait, it's me, don't leave me behind. They froze. It was coming from ahead. Shirley raised her lantern, heart pounding. That's not him. That's the thing wearing his voice. But it sounded so real. Truyen gritted his teeth. How do we kill something we can't even see clearly? Shirley stared down the hall. We don't kill it. He turned to her. We trap it. She pulled out the small talisman the monk had given her days before, during their stop at the ruined pagoda outside the village. At the time, he'd said, if you face a soul that isn't yours, return it to its origin. She hadn't understood then. She did now. They reached another chamber, this one, older than the others. The carvings here were in gold, depicting humans pulling dark entities from mirrors, binding them in stone, in jars, in ash. This was a binding room. This is where they kept the mirror before, Shirley realized. Before it was moved. Before the tomb was broken. The masked figure from before had mentioned the balance was shifting. This was why. Hao's soul was trapped inside that mirror, and whatever escaped wasn't alone. Shirley turned to Truyen. Help me prepare the seal. As they began to draw the symbol on the ground using the remaining ashes and ink from their supplies, the voices came again, closer this time. Footsteps, shadows, and then Hao stepped into the room again, smiling. Guys, stop this, it's me. But they didn't stop. As Shirley raised the talisman, the shadow Hao snarled, voice cracking. You don't know what you're doing. Oh, but I do, she whispered, and she dropped the talisman into the center of the sigil. The room exploded with light. The mirror in the other chamber shattered completely, and from it, a scream echoed through the entire tomb. Not just one scream, many. When the light faded, the room was empty. No Hao, no mirror, just silence. But Shirley knew. This wasn't the end. It was only a glimpse of something far older, far deeper. And whatever had touched Hao's soul might have touched them too. They weren't out yet. And the tomb? It still had more secrets to reveal. The final seal, when treasure becomes a trap. The torchlight flickered as the group stood before the ancient stone door, carved with inscriptions in a language none of them could read, flintlock except for Shirley. The masked figure had vanished once again, leaving behind the cold echo of his laughter. The mirror, still resting in Shirley's backpack, had exposed something terrifying just hours earlier. One of them wasn't truly human anymore. Fatigue etched into everyone's face. They had trekked through tombs, faced traps, and witnessed things beyond imagination. But nothing had prepared them for this final chamber sealed gate, rumored to house the treasure or the curse. Do we open it? Fatima asked, her voice breaking the heavy silence. Do we even have a choice? Professor Chen murmured, running a trembling hand through his damp hair. We've come too far to stop. Shirley, however, wasn't so sure. Since the mirror incident, she had kept a distance. Not physically, but emotionally. She had seen a different reflection. When she looked into the mirror of true soul, her own image staring back, terrified. As something stood just behind her, something wearing her face. Even worse, when she had asked the others to look into it. One of them, Sumian, had cast no reflection at all. But she hadn't dared to say it aloud. Not yet. Instead, she turned her attention to the seal on the stone door. These aren't just decorative carvings, she whispered. They're warnings. This isn't a door protecting a treasure. It's a door protecting us from what lies inside. Professor Chen knelt beside her, brushing dust off the inscription with his sleeve. Can you translate it? Shirley nodded slowly, her voice eerily calm as she read aloud. Let no living soul pass beyond this gate. Riches beyond measure await, but at the cost of your own. The keeper waits, the seal binds. To break it is to awaken the forgotten. Fatima shivered. The keeper sounds like a thing, not a guardian, but a prisoner. No one replied. Then the floor trembled just subtly, like a distant growl from deep beneath the earth. Dust trickled from the ceiling. The mirror in Shirley's bag vibrated, as if reacting to the seal. It was Professor Chen who finally stood, brushing off his knees. I didn't come all this way to turn back now. He stepped forward, placing his hands into the two stone impressions embedded in the wall beside the gate. They fit perfectly, as if designed for a specific person to open. Wait, Shirley shouted. We don't know what kind of trap. But it was too late. With a deep, grinding noise, the stone shifted. The symbols on the door glowed faintly red, as if the ancient language itself bled. Then click. The seal broke. The stone gate didn't swing open like a regular door. It melted, crumbled inward, piece by piece, revealing a staircase descending into a hollow darkness far too deep to see the bottom. From within the darkness came a gust of wind, to see cold, but foul, like ancient breath exhaled for the first time in centuries. A low whisper echoed up the stairs. A voicino, many voice layered atop one another, unintelligible yet heavy with meaning. Fatima's hand flew to her mouth. Something's awake down there. Shirley took a step back. We should seal it again. Now. But Professor Chen was already halfway down the stairs, flashlight in hand, beckoning them to follow. It's just a psychological barrier. That voice is designed to frighten intruders. It's not real. Shirley wanted to believe that, but the mirror was buzzing in her backpack again. Reluctantly, she followed. The descent took longer than expected. The air grew colder, denser, and time itself felt warped. Eventually, the staircase opened into a massive underground chamber, vast, domed, and filled with strange statues, all facing inward toward a central pedestal. On that pedestal was the treasure. It looked like a golden sarcophagus, encrusted with rubies, sapphires, and carvings in the same ancient language as the door. But it wasn't lying down, it was standing upright, as if someone was inside. Shirley's breath caught in her throat. That's not treasure, that's a coffin. Fatima circled it slowly, or a prison. Professor Chen moved forward, inspecting the pedestal. It's sealed with a latch, no mechanism or trap I can see. As his fingers reached for the latch, the mirror in Shirley's bag exploded with light. The chamber shook. All the statues turned their heads in unison, silently, toward the group. Fatima screamed, "Did you see that?" "Step away," Shirley shouted. "This is a binding ritual. That sarcophagus isn't holding treasure, it's holding the keeper." But it was too late. Professor Chen flipped the latch open. Everything went black. For a moment, there was no light, no sound, no gravity. just endless emptiness. Then a pulse, a heartbeat that didn't come from anyone living. The chamber lit up in a crimson glow, not from the torches but from the eyes of the statues. The sarcophagus creaked, then cracked, the golden surface splitting open like an egg from within. A pale hand emerged then, elongated, with too many joints and black nails that curled like claws. Then the voice returned, clearer now. The seal is broken. The debt must be paid. The keeper stepped out. It wasn't human, not anymore. It had the vague form of a man, but its face was featureless, smooth skin stretched over bone. No eyes, nose, or mouth. Just a single red glyph burned into its forehead. It raised its hand. Professor Chen gasped, stumbling backward. I made a mistake. The keeper didn't move like a creature. It glided, hovering just above the ground. It passed through the statues as if they were air, heading straight for the group. Fatima fell to her knees, clutching her head. I hear it in my mindets speaking to me. It wants. Suddenly, her voice cut out. She began levitating. Her body stiffened, eyes rolling back, as her limbs twisted unnaturally. The keeper hovered around her, whispering in that ancient tongue only Shirley could vaguely recognize. It was invoking a Bindinga replacement. Shirley's heart pounded. This wasn't just a guardian, it was a collector. It didn't kill intruders. It took them. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the mirror. The glow had intensified, almost blinding now. And then it happened. The mirror reflected the truth. The image of Fatima in the mirror wasn't Fatima anymore. Her face was distorted, her eyes empty, her reflection smiling even as her real body convulsed. It's too late, Shirley whispered. She's gone. The keeper turned to her. It saw the mirror and recoiled. For the first time, it seemed vulnerable. Professor Chen scrambled to his feet. What do we do? Shirley stared at the sarcophagus. We have to seal it. It's the only way. But it's open, he shouted. No, Shirley said, turning to the statues. They're not just decorations. They're part of the ritual. They were protectors. She held the mirror high. The statues responded, glowing brighter, moving their arms into formation. The keeper screamed, not with sound, but with thought. Their heads pounded. The mirror cracked but still glowed. With a final chant, Shirley shouted a phrase from the inscriptions. Return to where you rest. The debt shall be delayed. The statues surrounded the keeper, locking it in with beams of light. The sarcophagus reassembled itself, snapping shut as if time reversed. The light vanished. The silence returned. Fatima dropped to the ground, unconscious but breathing. Hours later, the group resurfaced, battered and shaken. The tomb had begun collapsing once the seal was restored. Whatever magic held the place together was weakening. Outside, the sun was rising, a crimson sky bleeding into gold. They had survived, but the treasure was lost, and so was a piece of themselves. Shirley held the cracked mirror tightly in her hands, still faintly glowing. The keeper was sealed again for now, but something told her the final trap had only just begun. The city below, memories that don't belong to humans. The silence after the collapse of the ancient seal was suffocating. Dust swirled in the air as the stone gate slowly groaned open. Light from Shirley's flashlight barely pierced the thick darkness beyond the final chamber. Professor Truyen, clutching the old scrolls now torn at the edges, whispered under his breath, "We weren't supposed to come this far." What lay beyond that gate wasn't gold. It wasn't bones or a royal tomb. It was a tunnel. A descending spiral staircase carved meticulously into stony older than anything human hands could have ever etched. "No carvings," said Jack, sweeping his flashlight across the walls. "No markings. It's sterile." But as they stepped further down, the temperature dropped sharply. and the sound like something distant breathing began to follow them. Shirley Diang took the lead, heart pounding. Every instinct told her to turn back, but something deeper, perhaps not even human, pulled her forward. She'd seen too much to turn around now. The spiral ended in a vast chamber, easily the size of a stadium, with arched ceilings and impossible architecture. Giant obsidian pillars rose from the ground, glowing faintly with a blue light that pulsed like veins. Jack murmured, "This isn't from any civilization we've ever studied. This is pre-human." A single word echoed across Shirley's mind as she stared into the void of the room: memory. The city sprawled before them, buried under layers of soil and secrecy for thousands of years. It wasn't ruins, not in the traditional sense. It felt preserved, like a place still waiting for its people to return. Streets paved with black stone snaked through towering spires. Shapes moved in the mist, just out of focus, not human, never human. Suddenly, Truyen dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "They're speaking, no, they're remembering," he gasped. "What do you mean?" Shirley knelt beside him. "The city, it's alive. The stones remember. The walls are whispering their past directly into my mind. This was once home to a race older than myth." He was shaking now. They called themselves the Oracle, a species born from the stars. Their bodies were tall and crystalline, their voices like vibrations through glass. They didn't speak like us, they shared thoughts through memory. As if summoned by his words, the walls began to glow, faintly at first, then growing in strength. Jack turned slowly, his voice cracking. Guys, I think we've woken it up." From the mist came the first true shape, tall, thin, made of something translucent and shimmering. It didn't walk, it glided, it didn't breathe, but it watched. No face, no eyes, but they knew they were being studied. The entity paused, then placed a hand, if it could be called that, in the wall. Images erupted into Shirley's mind. Explosions in the sky, cities on fire, portals closing, time folding. The Oracle had tried to escape something they themselves had created. It was their knowledge, Truyen whispered, their ability to bend memory, and thought they used it to reshape reality. But something went wrong. They lost control. In a moment of desperation, the Oracle sealed their city beneath the Earthnet to hide from humans, but to quarantine their own history. And now Shirley and the others had broken the seal. One of the spires nearby cracked open like a flower blooming. Inside it wasn't stone or artifacts, but a pod, transparent, filled with dark, swirling liquid. Something floated inside. A body. At first glance, it resembled a human, pale skin, feminine form. But when its eyes opened, black as space, no whites at all, Shirley realized this wasn't human. Jack reached for his gun, but the creature never moved. It simply stared, and in his mind, he heard a single, unmistakable voice: "I remember you." Panic gripped the group. "What the hell does that mean?" Jack shouted. "How can it remember us?" "It doesn't," Truyen said grimly. "It remembers itself, and we are just echoes in its mind now." The creature stepped from the pod without making a sound. With every footstep, the ground hummed. Light surged across the city as other pods began to crack open one by one. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All waking. Shirley turned to the others, her voice tense but calm. "We need to go, now." They began to retreat, but the city didn't let them. Walls reformed behind them, closing off exits. The paths they took in no longer existed. The memory of their route had been erased. "That's impossible," Jack shouted. "No," Truyen said slowly, "that's memory architecture. The city is reshaping itself to keep us here. Not physically, conceptually, it's rewriting our place in space." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means we don't belong in their story. Truyen whispered. And stories don't keep characters that don't fit. As the awakened beings approached, they didn't attack. They reached out not with arms, but with thought. Shirley staggered as a flood of images poured into her. Forests of crystal, skies with 3 suns, children with voices that could freeze time, and then darkness, war, betrayal, a rift opening between dimensions. They had been gods once, then prisoners of their own power. The city wasn't a tomb. It was a penitentiary, and now the prisoners were free. One of the creatures placed a hand on Shirley's chest, her vision blurred. She saw herself not as Shirley. She was taller, alien, floating among stars. She wasn't just in the memory, she was part of it. No, she gasped, this isn't mine. It is now, the voice whispered. Suddenly, Jack fired. The sound shattered the illusion. One of the creatures dropped, motionless. The rest stopped, and then, as one, screamed. It wasn't a sound, it was a force. A memory being erased in reverse so loud it made the blood in their veins vibrate. Lights exploded, the ground shook. Run, Shirley yelled. They bolted toward the nearest exit, navigating the ever-changing maze of the city. Behind them, the beings floated, not walking, not flying, just existing in pursuit. Truyen collapsed, his nose bleeding, eyes vacant. He's trapped in a loop, Shirley said. They've overwritten his memory. He's seeing their past over and over, can't break free. She knelt and screamed into his face. You're not them. You're not them. His eyes flickered. I remember now, he whispered. We never should have come. They dragged him forward. Finally, they reached a massive staircase they hadn't seen before. A way out, or another trick. Jack didn't wait. He charged up. The others followed, breathless. As they reached the surface, light from their torches faded. Behind them, the city dimmed but didn't vanish. It had moved deeper, buried itself again, waiting. The surface air was warm, real. They were back. Shirley collapsed to her knees. No gold, no treasure, just a story no one would believe. But as she turned, she noticed something carved into the stone wall near the entrance fresh. Not in any language she knew, but she understood it perfectly. Memory is a prison. You are now part of ours. She didn't tell the others. Not yet, because in her dreams that night she was floating again. A city below, stars above, and a voice whispering, we never left, becoming a part of the curse who has been chosen. The silence that followed was thick, almost alive. For a long moment, none of them moved. Thus floated lazily in the dim blue glow from their remaining flashlight. Beneath them, the stairs leading down to the sunken city remained open, a spiraling mouth carved into ancient stone, yawning like a throat ready to swallow. The murals they had passed just minutes before now felt different, like they were watching, like something was waiting. Kwong gripped his chest, his breath shallow. There's something wrong, he murmured, his voice hoarse. I can feel it. It's like we triggered something down there. Nan nodded grimly. We didn't just find ruins. We found something that wasn't meant to be found. As they turned to head back up, a soft humming began to echo from below. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural. It was alive. Lin turned pale. Do you hear that? That humid's in my head. It's like it's trying to talk. Chulhoa, the oldest and calmest of them all, suddenly froze in place. Her eyes widened. It's not just humming, it's choosing. What do you mean? Fik asked, stepping back from her. She didn't answer. Instead, her body trembled. Her lips moved as if whispering silently to something none of them could see. Then she collapsed. The rest of the team scrambled to lift her. Lin cradled Hoa's head, tears welling up. She's not breathing right. We have to get out. Nam checked her pulse, still there, but weak. Her eyes fluttered. and then just for a split second they rolled back completely white. When they refocused, something wasn't the same. Hoa looked at them, but it wasn't her looking anymore. "The curse requires balance," she said in a voice not entirely her own. "For what has been awakened must be fed." They all froze. Then she slumped unconscious again. No one spoke for several seconds. When they finally gathered themselves, they moved Hoa to a flat stone platform near the staircase, unsure whether to carry her out or wait. But no matter how far they walked, the stairway never seemed to end. They realized the path behind them had changed. Walls that were there before had shifted. Carvings on the walls had moved. They were no longer in the ruins they had entered. They were inside the curse. Lin began to cry quietly. "It's like we're trapped in a puzzle that keeps rewriting itself." Kwang gritted his teeth. "I think we triggered it when we opened the last seal. It wasn't just an artifact, it was a tomb, or worse, a prison." Nam walked to a nearby wall, running his hands along the smooth surface. "And prisons need guards," he said softly. "But what happens when the guards are long gone?" Lin shivered. "Then the prisoners choose someone else." That night, they decided to take shifts watching over Hoa. But sleep didn't come. The walls breathed softly. Shadows moved even when no one did. And in the distance, that humming continued, a lullaby sung by something ancient, something not meant to be remembered. Sometime near dawn, Hoa woke again. Her voice was back to normal, but her eyes weren't. "I saw them," she whispered. "They lived down there. Before us, before humans. But they knew. They saw the future. They knew we would dig too deep." She grabbed Nam's hand tightly. "One of us must stay. One of us must become part of the curse, or the city will rise." "What do you mean, rise?" Fik asked, stepping closer. "The city is not buried because of time," Hoa answered. "It was buried on purpose. It wasn't destroyed. It was locked below the earth, where no sunlight could reach it." "And if no one is chosen?" Kwang asked. "Then the prison crumbles, and what's inside walks free." They fell silent. It wasn't long before Hoa confessed what the dream had shown her. The city wasn't just a remnant, it was alive, held in limbo between decay and rebirth by one simple rule: one must stay. A living offering, a soul to bind the doors shut. And now, the curse had begun its choosing. As the hours passed, the pressure in the air increased. The temperature fluctuated wildly, one moment freezing, the next unbearably hot. Nam saw his own shadow twitch, even when he stood still. Fook lost consciousness briefly and claimed he had seen himself outside his own body, standing among pale figures that whispered in languages he didn't understand. But the worst came when Lin vanished. It happened in seconds. She had just stepped around a corner to examine a strange artifact half buried in the stone. When Nam followed her only moments later, she was gone. In her place, a marking on the wall glowing faintly, shaped like a handprint, pressed deep into the stone. It wasn't human. It had too many fingers. Hoa wept. She wasn't chosen to stay. She was taken. The group, now down to 3, sat in silence. There was no logic anymore. No way out. The city moved like a maze. The only thing that remained constant was the stairway down. Fook finally spoke. "I think it wants us to choose. If we don't, it will." Nam clenched his fists. "And it will take us one by one. Just like Lin." Hoa looked up slowly. "Then maybe we should decide. Maybe that's the only way to end it." They looked at each other. Suspicion was creeping in. Fear had turned inward. "Why you?" Kwang asked Hoa suddenly. "Why do you know so much about this curse?" Hoa looked at him, hurt. "I didn't ask for this knowledge. It was given to me. Or maybe you're the one the curse chose first. Maybe it's been in you this whole time." Nam stood between them. "Stop." This is what the curse wants to divide us. But it was too late. The air began to hum violently. Walls trembled. The stairway behind them cracked open wider, revealing not stone but a gaping void filled with whispers. Hoa screamed. Fick collapsed to his knees. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but directly into their minds. You entered uninvited. You disturbed the balance. One must remain. Choose, or all will be consumed. In that moment, Fick stood up. I'll do it, he said. Nan turned, shocked. What? I've seen it. I've seen what will happen if we don't, Fick said, his voice hollow but resolute. They showed me when I blacked out. Lin was taken, because we didn't choose. If we keep refusing, more will vanish. Then the seal breaks. The city rises. He turned to Nam and Hoa. But if one of us offers willingly, the prison holds. Hoa shook her head. No, we can find another way. There is no other way. Nam stepped forward. I'll go instead. I dragged you all here. This was my expedition, me ambition. Let me be the one. But Fick smiled softly. And that's exactly why you must live. So you can tell others never to return. Then, without another word, Fick turned and walked down the stairway into the void. The air stilled. The hum faded. And just like that, the carvings returned to their original places. The walls stopped shifting. The door at the surface reappeared behind them. Fick was gone. But the curse was satisfied. Nam and Hoa emerged days later, traumatized, but alive. They never spoke of the city again. The footage was destroyed. The notes were burned. But the memory, it stayed. And deep beneath the earth, in a city that never dies, a single soul walks endlessly, keeping the door shut with every step, until the next ones come, and fail to choose. The final blow of the candle is the ghost still blowing it out. The ancient city beneath the cemetery had collapsed. Walls had crumbled. Black stone had swallowed the last traces of the strange, extinct civilization. Only one path remained, lit faintly by a line of flickering oil lamps that led the survivors upward. They were not menus for them now. The rest had vanished into the city's cursed bones, or had been claimed by whatever dark force slept beneath. But even as they escaped into the corridor toward the surface, something was off. The air had grown cold, not like natural cold, but a strange breathless chill, as if the air itself was being exhaled by something invisible. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of a candle being blown out echoed fold by utter blackness. One of the lamps behind them had gone out. Lin turned back, holding tightly to the single working flashlight they had salvaged. Did you hear that? She whispered. No one answered. They didn't need to. The others had heard it tuned worse. They had felt it. A presence. A weight. Something was still here. Still alive, if that word even applied to it. Quang's voice was barely more than a breath. I thought we ended it. I thought we gave it what it wanted. Mike trembled, her voice cracking. It wasn't enough. The phrase cut through the dark like a knife. It wasn't enough. Those words had been carved on the wall of the ancient chamber. They had assumed it meant past sacrifices weren't sufficient. But maybe it wasn't about the past. Maybe it was about them now. One more light went out. Then another. Until only the flashlight remained, shaking slightly in Lin's hands. They moved faster, nearly stumbling through the tunnel. Every 10 steps, the sound of a flame being snuffed followed them. It was like the darkness was hunting the light. And when the last flame died, what would be left? They reached a stone stairwell that spiraled upward, seemingly towards safety. But as they climbed, Mai gasped. There's writing on the wall, she said, pointing. It's glowing. Indeed, faint phosphorescent symbols crawled up the spiral walls, in that strange, non-human language, But now, somehow, they could read it. Their minds, touched by the city's energy, could understand. Light is memory. Blow the light. Erase the soul. Kwong stopped. What does that mean? Lin swallowed. Maybe every time the flame goes out, something is taken. A piece of someone, of us. As if in answer, the flashlight flickered, then went dead. Silence, utter darkness, and in the pitch black, they heard it again fois, but this time it was no candle. It was breathing. Heavy, labored breathing. Right behind them. I screamed. Lin turned, swinging the flashlight like a weapon. But nothing was there. Nothing visible. But the air was thick. The walls seemed to bend. And from somewhere deep within the stairwell, a whisper echoed, not a voice, but a thought planted in their minds. One of you still remembers. That must be taken. Kwong clutched his head. It's in my mind. Get it out. It's talking to me. They rushed up the stairs, blind, hands scraping stone, hearts pounding. Suddenly, a faint light appeared at the top of the stairwell. Moonlit. The exit. Salvation. But just as they reached it, Mai fell. Not by accident. She was pulled. Her scream was short and senseless. No body, no sound. Just gone. And with her, the air grew heavier. The breathing returned. Kwong and Lin burst out of the stairwell into the cool night, emerging in the center of the old cemetery. The graves were still. The wind was still. Everything looked normal, almost. But the oil lamps that lined the cemetery paths were still lit. One by one, as they ran, the lamps began to go out. Fway, fway, fway. By the time they reached the village edge, only a single flame remained. An old lantern hung beside the shrine. That had marked the start of their descent days earlier. They dared not blow it out. They dared not go near it. Instead, they collapsed beside it, trying to catch their breath, hoping, praying that whatever haunted them was trapped below. But as dawn rose and the first villagers arrived, everything looked untouched. No ruins, no ancient stairwell, just a cemetery, and to traumatized survivors. Kwong refused to speak. He had lost something, a piece of his mind, perhaps, or his memory. He stared blankly into space, lips muttering unintelligible words. Lin was the only one who still held onto reality, and even then, just barely. She tried to explain to the elders what had happened. They shook their heads. That city you saw, an old woman whispered. It has been buried for centuries. Sometimes people hear it calling. They follow. Most don't return. But why? Lin asked. What does it want? The old woman looked at her gravely. It feeds on what you forget. Your memories, your soul. Every candle that goes out is a piece of someone being erased. Some believe it is a spirit not human that lived before us. Others say it's not a spirit at all, but a remnant of something that was never supposed to wake again. Then she paused and added one last chilling sentence. But the one who survives always carries it back. Weeks passed. The village resumed its quiet rhythm. The cemetery remained undisturbed. Kwong was taken to a facility far away, his mind deteriorating rapidly. Lin stayed behind, unable to leave. She felt tethered, like part of her had been left down there, or worse, part of it had come up with her. She began noticing strange things. Doors open in the night, mirrors fogged with breath when no one was there, candles blowing out without wind. And once, just once, she heard it for behind her, when she was alone, in the dark. She spun, but nothing was there. Only her reflection. Only her own terrified eyes. On the 49th day after their return, traditional end of the mourning period, in Vietnamese belief, held a small vigil for Mai and the others. Just one candle, a bowl of water, and 3 sticks of incense. As the incense burned low, The candle flickered. She stared into the flame, whispering, "I remember. I still remember." The flame danced, then went out. Instantly, her head filled with a sound like rushing water, like static, like memories unraveling. She saw faces she didn't know, symbols, cities, skies that were not Earth's, beings with no eyes, no mouths, but somehow they were speaking. Then silence. She opened her eyes. The candle was out. The incense had turned cold. But she was no longer in her house. She stood in the center of the ancient city again, lit by millions of tiny flames. Each flame hovered in the air, unbound like fireflies. And among them were faces, the lost, the others. And then it appeared, not a form, a presence, the being behind the curse. It whispered in a voice that wasn't sound, "You are the last flame." And just like Thatlin was gone, her house was found empty, her belongings undisturbed. Only the candle remained on the table, still cold, still dark. But every night since, villagers say, if you walk past that house, you'll see a flicker in the window. Then you'll hear it, fwaya, like someone blowing out a candle. And if you're unlucky enough to look inside, you'll forget why you came. You'll forget who you are, because the curse doesn't end. It just waits for the next flame. When the curse refuses to die, they thought it was over. The candle had burned down to its base. The final breath had been held. The shadows had withdrawn. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was silence. But silence, as they would soon discover, is not always peace. Sometimes, silence is a warning, a whisper holding its breath. After the last incident, when the final person tried to blow out the last ritual candle, and a gust of wind beat them to it, they sat in that ruined temple, surrounded by the crumbling walls and the thick air of something unfinished. Nam, the only one who hadn't tried to leave or scream, slowly got to his feet. His hands trembled, not from fear anymore, but from something else, a weight, a truth settling into his bones. "I don't think it's done," he said quietly, eyes scanning the dark corners where the light had died. Lean clutched her coat tighter around her shoulders. "But we followed the steps. We burned the offerings. We said the names. We even gave it what it wanted." Hung, who had been the skeptic from the beginning, finally broke. What if what it wanted was never a body? What if the ritual wasn't to seal it, but to awaken it? There was a pause. Then came that sound again. A faint puff, like someone exhaling across your skin. Cold, deliberate. Lean shrieked and turned toward the sound, but there was no one. The shadows began to shift, not wildly, not dramatically, with purpose. Like something adjusting its limbs after a long sleep. Nam's face went pale. What if the curse doesn't die with the flame? What if it needs someone to carry it? The wind returned, not rushing through broken windows like before, but circling, spiraling, breathing. One by one, the candles relit themselves, not with fire, but with a dim, unnatural glow. Like the afterimage burned onto the back of your eyes when staring into something too bright, or too dead. Hung stumbled back. "Nah, this isn't supposed to happen," the monk said. "Did he?" Nam interrupted, eyes wide. "Or did we just believe what we wanted to hear?" Lean looked down at her hands. They were smudged with wax and ash. But something else caught her attention. The tips of her fingers were glowing, faintly, as if touched by the same strange light that reignited the candles. "No, no, 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 no," she whispered, scrubbing at her hands furiously. "What is this? What's happening to me?" Hung turned and bolted for the doorway. "I'm not staying here to become part of this freak show." But the door, which had remained stubbornly closed throughout their ordeal, now stood wide open, waiting, as if it wanted them to leave. Nam didn't move. That's not a good sign. Hung froze mid-step. What? Nam swallowed hard. Think about it. All this time, we were trapped. Now it opens just when things start getting worse. What if leaving is what activates the curse fully? No. Hung shook his head. You're just scared. You want to stay in this rotten place and die here. Be my guest. And then he ran. The others didn't chase after him. They couldn't. Because the moment Hung stepped over the threshold, the glow in the candles flared, and then extinguished completely. The temple shook not violently, but like something deep underground had just exhaled, a low rumble, more like a purr than a growl. Lean screamed, grabbing Nam's arm. What does it want? Nam stared toward the open doorway, where Hung had vanished into the night, and then the screaming began. It wasn't Hung. It was inside the temple. It echoed from the walls, from the ceiling, from under the floorboards. Dozens of screams, overlapping, some male, some female, some too distorted to be human. And then, a whisper. So close, so clear. You opened the door. Nam's knees buckled. Lean froze, tears streaking down her cheeks. There was no one behind them. Yet the voice came again. It only ends when someone stays. Nam looked at Lean. That's why the temple never let anyone leave before. Not until it found someone to replace what was taken. You mean? He nodded. Someone has to be the vessel. Someone has to stay inside the curse, to keep it asleep. It wasn't just a haunting. It was a cycle, a trade. She sobbed. But why us? We didn't ask for this. The ones before us didn't either. Nam said softly. That's what curses are. They don't ask for permission. They wait. They choose. Outside, the wind stopped. The door remained open. Nam took a slow breath. One of us has to stay, or it follows us and starts all over again. Lean shook her head violently. No, don't say that. We can find another way. We can burn it. Seal it. We can. Lean. Nam's voice was calm now. Resolved. I'm going to stay. She fell silent. From the beginning I felt it. Like something was watching. Not just angry but tired. It just wanted someone to understand. And maybe that's why I keep hearing the whispers clearer than anyone else. No, please, Lean begged, grabbing his hand. Don't do this. He smiled faintly. I'm not dying. I'm becoming the lock, not the key. With trembling steps, he turned and walked toward the altar. The candles, dead moments before, began to glow again this time, golden. Lean didn't understand it, but she knew. The curse was accepting the trade. Nam knelt before the altar. The light surrounded him like smoke, wrapping around his chest, arms, face. His voice was a whisper, but she heard every word. I am here, let them go, let it end. And just like that, the wind stopped, the temple stilled, and the door closed gently, but not violently. This time, it felt final. Lean stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the now quiet space where Nam had disappeared. And then she walked, out the door, down the path, into the early morning mist. A few weeks later, the village returned to normal, or as normal as a place burdened by decades of whispers could be. The temple remained standing, though overgrown again with vines and moss, as if time had resumed its slow erasure. No one dared approach, except one. A child, no older than 10, wandered too far during a game of hide and seek. He stood near the temple's gate, staring curiously at the stones. And then he heard it, a faint breath, like someone gently blowing out a candle. He turned. There were no candles, no shadows, only a soft voice, barely above the wind. Not yet. The boy blinked, and suddenly the air felt colder, as if somewhere deep inside those stone walls, the curse hadn't died. It had only paused, waiting for the next time someone tried to light a candle in the dark. And somewhere, not far away, a single flame flickered to life,